This video is sponsored by War Thunder, more on that later. Since the inception of this channel, the structural integrity of my anal sphincter has been tested countless times. Whether I was getting my ass beat in Dark Souls or in God of War, there have been no shortages to the bootylicious spankings I've endured. While reminiscing on these joyful times, a thought crossed my mind. Of all the games that have drawn inspiration from Miyazaki's library of masterpieces, which one's the hardest? Now, in order to answer such a colossal question, I've made it a goal of mine to play through as many Soulslikes as possible and rank them all based on the number of times my skulls kicked in. Due to the colossal task ahead of us, I knew I'd have to make this an entire series, and the only fair way to assign which games I'll be playing in each video is with a trusty randomizer. The first two games selected by this trusty wheel were Lies of P and Another Crab's Treasure, two remarkably different experiences. So join me in an excruciating adventure as we hope to answer one simple question. Now, in order to determine which of these games is the toughest, I'll be noting down and recording every single time I perished throughout each playthrough. The good news is that outside of the Dark Souls trilogy, I haven't touched another Souls-like, meaning every single playthrough of these games will be completely blind. Oh, what the fuck, you piece of shit. Using the death counts we get from each playthrough, we'll hopefully be able to create a list which ranks each Souls-like from easiest to hardest. Alas, with the background waffle out of the way, we're struck with our first roadblock, aligning the goddamn HUD to our widescreen monitor. Well fucking, this is a great start, isn't it? Having fucked around for long enough, we look to start the game only to be graced by a difficulty setting. Now, as someone who's closer to a Souls-like virgin than he is a Chad, I didn't expect to see difficulty settings on any of these games, let alone one often deemed the greatest. With that said, we're here to test these games at their intended difficulties, meaning we had no choice but to select Legendary Stalker, regardless of the anal fistings waiting to happen. Fuck! Oh, dude, I don't know what to do! I don't know what to do! The game begins with a talking butterfly begging us for help as it looks to impart its life force into us. What the person behind this butterfly had failed to realize, however, was the fact that we were a sex-addicted puppet whose frequent masturbation had not only led to us requiring a robotic arm, but also a self-induced coma. By some miracle though, the life force imparted in us somehow woke us up, and after getting our bearings, we're forced into selecting a combat style. Staying on theme, we picked the Path of the Bastard before departing the train to find that we'd been out for quite some time. The bustling scenes of Krat Station had shifted into this grim hellscape which housed these walking freak shows. As horrifying as this situation seemed, the bigger concern was the fact that we were about to shit ourselves if we didn't find a toilet ASAP. On our quest to find a toilet, we grabbed a few pulse cells, took out the remaining staff members and watched in horror as local law enforcement beat the shit out of innocent civilians. I hope we don't have to fight him. Our main focus remained on finding a goddamn toilet, which we did eventually do, although the experience was anything but sanitary. What the why is there a guy waiting to fucking bum me in the toilet? With our first crisis averted, our next goal saw us looking for a place to rest, which meant we'd have to escape this godforsaken station first. Thankfully, the arduous journey to the toilet had taught me numerous things, the most important of which were charge attacks. These powerful attacks made short work of the riffraff wandering around the station, and before we knew it, we were facing off against the same officer we'd seen pulverizing civilians beforehand. This encounter felt like our first real fight, as our attacks didn't seem to stagger him whatsoever. Not only that, but his attacks hurt like hell, and my parrying ability might as well have been non-existent at this point. By some miracle, I did manage to pull off a few perfect parries, which led to our first stagger and fatal attack. With his metal cheeks clanged, we grabbed the station keys and opened the doors to what could only be described as Paris if France had won the World Cup. With the odds of us finding suitable shelter now lower than ever, we ventured forth into the rainy streets before stumbling across a strange glow. Using literal plot armor, we're able to repair this strange device which we come to know as a stargazer. These stargazers not only replenish our health and pulse cells, but they act as the main beacon with which we can level up. The usual attributes are all here, alongside a few unique ones. The combat style we chose at the start of the game determines the attribute which holds most of our early points, and while you don't necessarily have to stick with that choice, in this case I fully embraced powering up our technique, as I was having more than enough fun poking enemies to death. The streets of Krat weren't just inhabited by janky puppets, however, they also came accompanied by robotic dogs who seemed hell-bent on mauling us to pieces, shedding doubt on whether they're truly man's best friend after all. Confusing idioms aside, one thing that did become clear was that measly vandalism wasn't getting us any extra loot. Disappointment aside, we narrowly avoided getting our skull smashed in by this absolute Chad, only to get shot to pieces around the very next corner. Oh shit, but you can actually parry fucking bullets. And yeah, fucking oh my god. With the realization that my reaction times mimic those of an aging granny, I returned to the area in which our death counter lost its virginity to exact some much needed revenge. Following this, we cleared out the remaining drunks, power leveled our technique, and traded words with what seemed to be the last remaining human to walk these streets. Sadly, he didn't sell anything that could re-induce our coma, meaning he was essentially useless to us. Angered, we take our rage out on this poor metal gate, unaware of the fact that we'd just stepped into the circus of nightmares.
Okay, we are cooked.
Now, as intimidating as the Parade Master is, his attacks are geared towards teaching us the basics of parrying. Unfortunately for him, he's been dealt the short straw of being the first boss, meaning he's limited by his long running attacks and sluggish movements, all of which made him fairly easy to deal with. In an absolute show of defiance, however, this guy ends up ripping his own head off, short-circuiting those very limiters and ushering in a much more complex phase 2. His attacks were quicker, more erratic, and harder to read, and while we ended up defeating him on our first attempt, we did so with no pulse cells left to our name. It seems taking out the Parade Master ultimately led to the collapse of the rest of his circus troupe, as we stumbled across one of his performers soon after. I know most of the people watching won't be able to speak puppet, so let me help translate. Please like the video and subscribe. Feeling responsible, we vowed to carry his essence with us, as the least we can do as fellow puppets is unite in a world that has gone mad. We then immediately shat on this vow as we're given the opportunity to stay in the city's only 5-star hotel. The only cost? Lying about our true identity. Inside, we're greeted by the character the designer spent the most time on. Because I mean, just fucking look at her. Holy shit. She introduces herself as Sophia and tells us that in order to stay even one night, we'd need to rescue the hotel's #1 investor.
What?
Considering we'd just spent the last hour fighting for our lives, however, I thought we deserved more of a break and chose to explore the hotel a bit more before leaving. As you can imagine, Hotel Krat acts as the hub world for this game and features multiple characters, all of which offer different things. Most of these characters we haven't actually met yet. In fact, the hotel felt so empty that the game itself had to teleport me to where I was supposed to go.
You're here to see Master Geppetto, right?
Wait, what?
Come this way.
I swear I looked everywhere. Fucking hell, maybe I am a puppet. Jenny here gives us a new Legion arm and acts as the arms dealer where we're able to upgrade our weapons and alter their handles. At this point, we've got fuck all to work with, and after spending a good 5 minutes wondering if I should even use our one hidden moonstone to upgrade our starting weapon, we made our way towards the Elysian Boulevard. Now, I wouldn't blame you for thinking these streets would offer more of the same. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if a Panther Delphine tank had run through these streets given its current state. Sadly, this game doesn't let us dominate the battlefield inside a tank, but the good news is that War Thunder does. War Thunder is the most extensive and inclusive vehicle combat game ever made, and is miraculously free to play on PC, console, and mobile devices. Dominate the battlefield in over 25 highly in-depth vehicles, which range from colossal tanks to state-of-the-art aircraft. Immerse yourself in the most intense and realistic combat, which not only features authentic sound effects and realistic graphics, but sees you piloting some of the greatest war machines ever created as you join a worldwide community of over 95 million players. Despite having one of the most impressive and complex vehicle damage models which isolates every specific part of each vehicle, War Thunder still manages to be extremely inclusive for both hardcore military fans as well as those who are craving more fast-paced simple fun by offering 3 separate modes. The best part of all of this, however, is that it's free to play on PC, console, and mobile devices. So, what are you waiting for? Enter the chaotic battlefields of War Thunder using my links in the description, where new and returning players on PC and consoles that haven't played in the last 6 months will also receive a massive bonus package featuring premium vehicles, 7 days of premium, as well as the new Eagle of Valor decoration. This offer is only available for a limited amount of time, so make sure you jump in now.
And now for something completely different.
The bad news, however, was that the puppet infestation was seemingly even worse here. Aw, you fucking c***. Despite the countless bullets we'd be pulling out of our left butt cheek later on, there were a few benefits to exploring this area, as it was here where we came across our first chest, and as a result, our first frame. This introduced the whole defense parts section of the inventory to me, which if I'm being honest, made no fucking sense at all at this point in my playthrough. Bro, what the fuck am I even looking at? Thankfully, my 2 working brain cells managed to equate green arrow up meaning good, although I wasn't fully aware of the detrimental impact weight could have just yet. Either way, an increase in defense was needed, as the rooftops here were filled with old drunks throwing their electrified grog at us, as well as washed up cleaners who in the aftermath of being fired had replaced all of their mops with massive spiked plungers. Holy fuck, man, this guy just ran through me! Unlike these janky puppets, however, we had been blessed with the ability to evolve, and fearing the drive-through plunger attack we'd just gotten bodied by, I resorted to abusing our new Legion arm to pull them in from range. The problem with this strategy though is that it only works when you know the enemy is there. What the fuck? The big guy, while scary, wasn't too hard to parry, and before we knew it, we were talking with yet another merchant who again sold nothing of value. As confusing as it was to wonder how he'd even reached this place, we had bigger things to worry about, as it seemed like we were getting jumped around every corner. I mean, you don't have to go far to see the lengths these assholes would go to jump your ass. Oh my, are you fucking kidding me? While exploring the rooftops, we were joined by a butterfly, who I thought would lead us to some cool loot. All this guy led us to, however, was a kick in the nuts. Oh fuck me, how am I supposed to know that, huh? As if things couldn't get any more embarrassing, we ended up dodging into our own death, although I'm going to gaslight all of you and myself into thinking that it was planned, as at least this way, we could go back and kill that butterfly. Returning to the street where we planned our own death didn't result in another clusterfuck thankfully, and instead saw us talking to a random stranger through their window. They had mistaken us for their hot Chad boyfriend, which honestly, who could blame them?
You're not that guy, pal, trust me. You're not that guy. Okay.
Remarkably, he wasn't the only one we got to talk to though, as we found ourselves conversing with a weeping woman whose baby had been taken from her. Honestly, we couldn't care less about what she was saying, helped along by the fact that we were immediately jumped by yet another police puppet. I'll be the first to admit that I wasn't great when it came to parrying just yet, but fuck me did I not pop an instant boner every time I managed to pull off a perfect parry. Fuck me, why does that feel so good? Thankfully, not being able to perfectly parry every attack didn't result in an instant death just yet, as I managed to defeat the Mad Donkey using a unique strategy that I termed getting absolutely railed. Yeah, get fucking skilled on, buddy. With the blood of a human on our hand, we're congratulated by this random stranger who just so happened to be the hotel's #1 investor, as well as our creator. With the worst family reunion behind us, we returned to the hotel where we once again upgraded our rapier. Considering the dire state of the puppets surrounding us, Geppetto couldn't help but take his anger out on us, telling us that we weren't going to get fed until the puppets inside City Hall were taken care of. What he had failed to mention, however, was that the puppet lying in wait made every other puppet we'd faced so far look like a children's toy. This was the moment I realized the game had well and truly pushed us off the deep end. Unlike the Parade Master, the Scrapped Watchman here doesn't hold back and features everything from continuous attack chains to delayed attacks and even some elemental bullshit that covers the entire arena. I learned very quickly that we weren't going to be able to face tank our way through this fight, especially his second phase, which was absolutely relentless. If we were to have any chance of beating this Watchman, we had to learn his attack timings and parry like our lives depended on it. Even then, one mistimed input seemed to be all it took to ruin an otherwise good run. Yet despite the beatings our cheeks were receiving, this fight was unbelievably fun. I wouldn't go so far as to say that the game finally clicked here, but something about these perfect parries just felt so euphoric to the point where I couldn't even be mad if I fucked them up. It also meant our victory in the end was just that much sweeter. Following this fight, I stumbled across this bench with the word friends beneath it, and it was here where we picked up a faded whistle. Blowing the same whistle in front of the stranger's window draws to our attention that the one named Murphy was the Scrapped Watchman all along, leading to a rather bittersweet realization that in the end, all he wanted was to avenge the children who had deemed him their friend. Looking to confront Geppetto about all of this, we once again returned to the hotel, although before we could get a word in, we're once again assigned a task which saw us travelling to the local sex bot factory in order to track down a billionaire who had apparently used his money to whisk away Geppetto's wife. To help us in our venture, we're introduced to P organs, which is essentially this game's iteration of a skill tree. Being the pussy that I am, I immediately locked in the pulse cell upgrade, as I knew we'd need all the extra heals we could get. We'd seen some pretty fucked up things already, but nothing beat these puppets dressed up as creepy ass dolls who also regurgitated their lunch at us for good measure. I also learned here that the auto lock function isn't always the best. Oh, what the, are you fucking kidding me? Wait, why did it fucking switch? The other guy was right in front of me. On the way back, we picked up a spam call. Why did you redeem it? Came across more booby traps and got absolutely shafted by one of Iron Man's early prototypes. Now, I'm being completely honest when I say that this guy was the toughest enemy we'd faced so far. Oh, just what the fuck, bro? This guy just can't stop railing me. It was pretty obvious that we had to bait out his attacks and quickly dart behind him to deal any significant damage. The only problem was that I was sucking some colossal dick at doing just that. It quite literally took every single pulse cell I had to defeat him, which wasn't ideal, as Vanini seemed to be an avid fan of the Dark Souls series, implementing his very own Poison Swamp area into the factory. With Blighttown PTSD sinking in, I instead chose to explore another part of the factory, as it couldn't possibly be worse than walking through a corrosive sewer, right? Oh, fuck me. What the fuck is that? I should have just gone into the swamp area, honestly. Yeah. To say I was having a bad time would be an understatement. With that said, we did uncover this secret room and picked up some cold drip. The confidence it instilled in us helped us do things we could only ever dream of, like take down the puppet of the future, murder this innocent survivor in cold blood, and most impressively, speak to a member of the opposite sex.
Pleased to see you, my stalker friend.
Wait, how does she know we've been stalking her? We were feeling so good in fact that we blitzed through the inner workings of the factory and got in touch with the man who had stolen Geppetto's wife. This godlike feeling came to an end, however, at the hands of a moving exhaust pipe. Bro, what the fuck am I even fighting? The fight against Fuoco was unique in the sense that I had absolutely no idea what to look out for when it came to reading his attack patterns. This was made even harder during his second phase, as I'd spend most attempts being burnt to smithereens by his molten shit. My greed in wanting this fight to be over definitely cost me a good few deaths, although I wouldn't exactly class him as a difficult boss in hindsight. Following his defeat, I finally got the urge to try out a new weapon, although in my excitement, I failed to notice the important point accompanying it. Upon returning to the hotel, we're surprised to see Vanini has made himself at home, especially considering he'd mentioned to us that he'd used Geppetto's wife's wedding ring as an eyelid on one of his prototypes years ago. In the hopes of keeping us silent, he gives us a special grindstone tool, allowing us to power our weapon with a particular element, should we have the respective grindstone. Now, considering we'd barely sharpened our weapon using the regular grindstone, it wasn't exactly the greatest gift, leading him to offer us an upgrade of our Legion arms. Unfortunately, we didn't have the materials required at this stage, so we instead chose to continue down the path past the factory, where I was reminded that not all weapons use the same amount of stamina. Oh shit, wait, I don't have any stamina. Ah, fuck, is it because I'm two-handing like a big weapon it uses more stamina? Stamina was the least of our problems, however, as these mines came filled with ranged assholes that couldn't help but throw their flaming hot turds at us. Escaping the mines, we end up in Moonlight Town, which like Krat had seen better days. Eventually we come across another stalker, who we can bypass once again by simply lying. You know, I think I'm starting to see how this game got its title.
Well, duh.
The resulting gondola ride took us up to a region called the Path of Misery, and considering this was the first thing we saw, it was clear that the game wasn't joking. Unlike the puppets we'd been fighting at Krat, these abominations were rapid, sprinting to their untimely deaths like their lives depended on it. In the hopes that this was some freakish nightmare, we prayed in front of every statue we came across, although it soon became clear upon witnessing the cathedral that not even God was saving us in this situation. Wait, what the? This fucking asshole just hit me out of a cutscene. Is that supposed to happen? The question on my mind, however, was who in the fuck was playing the organ throughout this cathedral? Perplexed, we made it one of our goals to find this mysterious organ player as we creeped our way across these beams, dealing with every monstrosity along the way. I'd go so far as to say that the climb to the cathedral was surprisingly easy, although the very moment I thought that, I was being greeted by the death screen once again, having been humbled by an infected Soulslike wielding creature. One thing I do appreciate about this game is just how clever the shortcuts loop back to a stargazer, as it means you're never truly that far from your deathbed. Granted, you'd have to find and activate the shortcut in the first place. Before long, we'd reached the library, which housed the last remaining member of the cathedral's god-awful book club. Exhausted from the copious amounts of Archbishop glaze protruding from our mouth, we instead looked to explore the rest of the cathedral, although with every step, this place felt more like a death trap than a cathedral. What kind of cathedral is laced with goddamn fucking traps? With the cathedral in its current state, we thought we'd be doing everyone a favor by burning this entire place to the ground, only to watch in horror as our best efforts led to fuck all. Clearing this gunk did in fact lead us to the boss room, although before taking the boss's D, we looked to inject our bodies with some vitamin D. Surprisingly, we run into someone going by the name of Alidoro, and despite his shady appearance, we told him all about Hotel Krat. Having possibly let a notorious serial killer into the hotel, we looked to take our minds off things, although it seemed like the Archbishop had other plans.
Brother, what's that?
Much like Fuoco, Andreas here was a rather awkward fight to get used to. His attacks are by no means fast, nor did they hit particularly hard. They are rather erratic however, and it felt like he never stopped attacking. By some miracle however, we managed to defeat him on our very first attempt. Or at least, I thought so. Yeah, so Andreas here is the first boss to have an entirely separate second phase, accompanied by a fully healed health bar and a plethora of new attacks. Given that I'd just used all of my pulse cells getting through the first phase, it was only a matter of time until we were well and truly cooked. My second attempt was even worse, as I allowed myself to become decayed, which not only sucked the life out of my health bar, it also sucked the last remaining brain cells out of my brain. What I forgot to mention before was the fact that Alidoro holds some of the best weapons and amulets in the game. The only catch is that we have to trade boss ergos to obtain them, something I happily did when I noticed an umbrella with A tier technique. My pitiful attempts at the Archbishop had taught me one thing. I was absolutely dogshit at using larger, slower moving weapons, meaning it was finally time to give this admittedly sharp umbrella a test run. And boy did it not disappoint. Holy fuck, I'm rinsing him. Wait, what the hell is his damage? Unfortunately, even a god tier weapon like this couldn't make up for the fact that I couldn't parry for shit. But we were getting closer. My fourth attempt went much better, although I once again ran into a problem that I hadn't experienced yet. That being my weapon shattering on me mid-fight. All I remember was panicking, as my grinder didn't seem to be doing shit. What the fuck? Why is it not repairing? Can I not repair it when it's like fully broken? What? Thankfully, I had a few thermite items on hand, which I could use to finish off the fight, but fuck me did this experience hardwire my brain to focus on weapon durability going forward. From here, we returned to the hotel, got some much needed upgrades, and looked to return to the Archbishop Glazer, all in the hopes of changing her allegiance to us. What the fuck has happened to her? So apparently her loyalty to the Archbishop was so great that upon learning of his monstrous state, chose to become a monster herself. How lovely. Wanting nothing more than to depart this nightmarish place, we looked to join the path of the pilgrim, a choice we'd soon regret as we stepped into every conceivable bear trap. The town to follow was more of the same as we slowly dealt with every carcass along the way. Things would get rather dicey soon after as we're ambushed by this absolute unit who smashed our skull in until we had no pulse cells left. Thankfully, we discovered a lift close by that took us all the way back to the initial stargazer and what could only be described as a miracle. Following this, we partook in some sketchy platforming reminiscent of the well in Dark Souls 2, fell for another scam call in the Malum district,
Why did you redeem it?
and joined forces with the Red Box in the hopes that we can impress her with our fighting ability.
What do you think? Not bad, eh? Our new dumbass.
Little did I know that these bastards would ultimately shit themselves, being unable to continue literally 5 minutes in, meaning that we were once again on our own. This wasn't exactly ideal, as the following areas had everything from walking cancer cells to pancreas-throwing mutants. Oh, and of course there were still bear traps for no plausible reason. Ah, for fuck's sake, why are they even here? It got to the point where I started questioning every collectible I found, as I just knew there'd be some arsehole waiting to bum rush us. Yeah, nice try buddy, I fucking knew it. After a rather uneasy encounter with Edward Scissorhands, we made our way into the Red Lobster Inn, although upon viewing the main room, I began to question the 5-star reviews this place had gotten. Our excitement further soured when we learnt that this place didn't even offer complimentary breakfasts, and in a fit of rage we looked to hunt down the owners and set things straight. What we got in return, however, was one of the coolest boss intros I've ever witnessed. The dopamine assaulting my entire body was so strong in fact that I quite literally died within 10 seconds following this cutscene. Fucking hell, that cutscene was fucking sick. This excitement quickly wore off however, as I watched P get obliterated time and time again. Our one saving grace is the fact that they don't all dogpile us at once, and instead come at us one at a time for the large majority of the fight. The moment you start clapping their brothers' cheeks a bit too hard though, they'll drop in and start unloading attacks on you. This not only means we're dealing with multiple attack patterns at once, but they'll also overlap and stack their combos on top of each other, leading to a devastating beatdown if we're not careful. This was by far the toughest fight we'd encountered, but what a fight it was. Having sent their family into disarray, we used this chance to pilfer their hideout, stealing any and everything we could get our hands on. We came across Giangio again, which was rather unexpected, but even this surprise would pale in comparison when learning that the Black Rabbit's Brotherhood looped back to Hotel Krat. Wait, what? No fucking way. Wait, how does it, I'm sorry, that doesn't actually make any fucking sense. With our minds blown, we completed a few more upgrades, collected the Rosa Isabel Street key from Antonia, and made our way towards the Estelle Opera House. I was initially surprised to see how similar the enemies were to the ones we'd been beating up on in the early game, although this feeling would quickly subside as we encountered goddamn babies that would constantly heal themselves, as well as these assholes that magically pulled grenades out of their hats. The following hour saw us obliterating the White Lady, as well as almost having a heart attack while fighting the Mad Clown puppet. We also met the last normal looking human, only to find out that he'd been having intercourse with a puppet. Unfortunately, we wanted some reward, so we lied and told him that his puppet wife loved him, before returning to the hotel where we switched out our Legion arm for the first time. We upgraded our umbrella a few times, meaning it was finally time to confront the king of the puppets. Oh, for fuck's sake. Estella Opera House was filled to the brim with puppets, although these ones weren't your typical fodder. In fact, they were the closest thing to actual puppets as they had strings attached to them, making them even stronger and immune to staggers. Because of this, it was important that we dealt with these spider puppets first, although this was easier said than done, as it was very easy to get overwhelmed by the number of puppets in these halls. During our annihilation spree, we came across Adelina, whose heavenly voice had been nerfed by the petrification disease. With her career well and truly over, we thought it best to let her know that we also annihilated her sister before witnessing the worst stage ever concocted. Thankfully, this was all a ploy to introduce the King of Puppets, a rather intimidating entity who wasn't nearly as hard as I'd expected. By this point, however, I just expected every boss to have a second phase. What I couldn't have predicted, however, was just how difficult this one would be. Ah, we're just fucking cooked, aren't we? Holy skill check. Romeo has to be the first boss whose second phase is significantly tougher than his first. The first phase features rather slowish moves that are all telegraphed, albeit there are some tougher attacks to read, especially when he's kind of like hobbling around the arena on his, his big arm things. The moment he sheds his massive shell, however, Romeo becomes a speed demon, dashing around the arena while throwing out some rather nasty combos. This becomes even more unmanageable when he coats his scythe in fire, allowing him to throw out continuous attacks for the next 5 business days. Holy fuck, what? Dude, holy, just leave me alone, holy fuck. How many fucking attacks does he have? In fact, when I did eventually beat him, he never once coated his scythe in fire. I'm not sure if that's like intended or whatnot, I was just glad I'd taken down the king of puppets. Defeating him had a far greater impact on the world than I'd ever imagined, as the puppets roaming the streets were now mourning him as if they'd lost one of their own. If we're being honest though, I just saw this as the perfect opportunity to farm some ego, as none of these puppets seemed capable of fighting back. With the puppets out of commission, it was now up to the alchemists and their army of carcasses to provide content for the rest of the game. And while these initial enemies weren't too difficult, the further into the grand exhibition we explored, the worst things became. By the time we'd arrived at the plaza, we were getting absolutely shit on by some washed up actors who had failed their Odyssey auditions. Thank God these hunks didn't respawn, as I wasn't exactly having a relaxed time inside the exhibition either. One thing I will say is that despite the anal fisting we received from these fucking units, it was always worth it to take them down, as they either dropped good items or guarded great ones. Our eventful day at the exhibition ended with us being molested in a corner, finding yet another human that honestly shouldn't be alive, and facing off against the current UFC champion, Victor. Now Victor, all things considered, was nothing compared to Romeo in terms of difficulty. He definitely has some rather quick attacks, especially in his second phase where he starts to delay them, but outside of a single death, he went down rather easily. As if to mog us to the high heavens, we watch Victor get one shot right before our eyes as a dapper man makes his grand appearance. This here is Simon Manus, the leader of the alchemists and one of the most brain-dead characters we'd witnessed so far. It wouldn't surprise me if this guy indulged in dishwashing detergent as his main beverage, because how in the fuck can you look at this orgy of carcasses and believe you're saving humanity? Shockingly, he mentions the Isle of Alchemists and even invites us aboard the island. The only problem was that our Maps app hadn't been updated in decades, meaning we couldn't pinpoint the exact location of this island. Upon returning to the hotel, we noticed that Bill had stalked us all the way back, although our concerns lied elsewhere, so we looked for clues on how to reach the Alchemist's Isle. Unfortunately, all this trip did was reinforce the idea that Geppetto was grieving the loss of his son, who he'd most definitely modelled us off. Not wanting to feed into his familial delusion, we instead looked to ask about possible methods which we could use to reach the Alchemist's Isle. Sadly, he knew about as much as a seasoned caterpillar, or in other words, fuck all. All we could do in this case was return to the exhibition where we ran into the Red Fox once again. She still didn't see us as a man, which was probably the most heartbreaking thing we'd experienced so far. With depression taking hold of us, we stumbled our way into the barren swamp, which just so happened to be the most annoying area we'd entered yet. I'm talking dogs who will literally throw themselves into explosive barrels to get cheap chip damage on us, mortar turrets that will snipe us from the next planet over, and worst of all, this goddamn children's toy who seems incapable of not jumping. The damage to our ego was so detrimental that I was dying to the goddamn owl doctor of all people. A boss most people consider a fucking elite enemy at best. Holy shit, that's really fucking bad. He was so low! The only relaxing part of this whole area was during our fights with the puppets of the future. These two behemoths awarded us some much needed quartz, which we could slot into phase 2 upgrades as they were far more useful than the honking upgrades offered in phase 3. It was also here that I finally discovered the usefulness of Pulcinella. Wait, you fucking kidding me? This guy here sells cranks? Oh my god. For some context, I'd been searching far and wide for technique cranks, as I needed 2 of them to improve the attribute ranking of our umbrella weapon. No matter how much I searched however, I just couldn't find them, only to realize 15 hours into our playthrough that this guy sold them all along. Not only that, but he also sold some insanely good amulets as well as the other special grindstones, meaning I wasn't hard locked into spamming only fire damage. I was so disappointed in myself that I completely forgot to use the technique cranks I'd just bought, meaning I went into the next boss fight with a subpar loadout, and considering who was waiting for us, we couldn't have made a worse decision. This here is the green monster of the swamp, or in other words, one of the more unpredictable bosses in the game. Not only does he have some rather erratic attacks, he's got one that to this day, I still have no idea how to avoid. How do you dodge this underground attack? Like, I'm trying to run away from it, I've tried dodging, I've tried blocking, nothing seems to work. My first attempt went about as well as you'd expect, although surprisingly, I locked the fuck in on my second attempt and almost defeated him. I'm such a greedy cunt. I'm so. Unlike the large majority of the bosses we'd faced so far, I strangely thought his second phase was easier than his first. The moveset felt extremely similar for some reason, and timing the parries almost came naturally to the point where I managed to defeat him on my very next attempt. Waiting behind its arena was Alidoro, who admits he'd fully blown his load watching us fight. Disturbed, we returned to Hotel Krat, where we handed over the golden ergo we'd gotten from slaying the beast to Vanini. He somehow turns this into the world's longest lasting battery, before mentioning that Antonia might know where the underground base of the alchemists was. In typical Souls-like fashion, we're led to believe that their super secret underground hideout is in fact connected to this hotel in some way or another. Because, well, of course it is. The only problem is that we have no way of opening the passage, meaning we'd first have to find some alchemists and then torture them into letting us through. Before embarking on this suicide mission, I made sure to alter our umbrella hand to its S tier variant, something I wish I'd done much earlier had I activated both of my brain cells. Making our way out of the barren swamp, we somehow end up at Krat Central Station once again, completing the full cycle back to where our journey had first began. The only difference this time around was that we were dealing with carcasses instead of puppets, some of which packed an incredible wallop. As we explored the station, we came across a miraculous discovery. A carcass enemy with the ability to talk.
Name's Atkinson. Krat militia.
He introduces himself as Atkinson, a lonely man who had unfortunately been stood up by his date and as a result had spent the last 2 weeks inside this carriage, slowly morphing into a carcass. Apparently the girl who had stood him up was none other than Belle, the one who had stalked us back to Hotel Krat, although the moment we pressed her about this, she quickly changed the topics and began rambling about how shit the dating pool was. Feeling for Atkinson, we looked to avenge him by annihilating every carcass we found, although our next roadblock wouldn't be any sort of carcass.
You lost, little lamb.
Now I have no idea if people consider the robber weasel a tough fight, but for whatever reason, this guy essentially took a nail gun to our sack over and over again. Oh my god, why did I greed there? Fuck me. I'm not sure if it was his delayed axe swings or his quick dashes that seemed to avoid every one of our charge attacks. There was just something about this fight that I could never get down. With him out of the way though, we entered our third Trinity room, picked up another cold fit, and watched in disbelief as the old charming city of Krat morphed into a gemstone miner's dream location. Well, as long as you ignore the copious amounts of walking testicles looking to end your life. For the most part, a lot of the locations in Lies of P aren't the toughest to traverse. In fact, I'd say they're somewhat easy for the most part, featuring a few tough enemies between each stargazer. The collapsing city of Krat, however, definitely turns things up a notch, especially when the now regular enemies have whole ass attack patterns and plenty of health. The fact that these enemies can overlap with each other posed a challenge we haven't come across yet, as we had to slow things down and make sure we weren't on the receiving end of someone else's walking stick. Eventually we came across the resident chef, who after realizing she had no one left to cook for, went completely insane. Now this is probably the strangest boss in the entire game. I have no idea what she is, nor why she's here. All I know is that she's a bitch to take down, especially considering she swings her butcher's knife at the speed of light. That was until I realized you could basically cheese block her to death as her damage wasn't all that high. While making our way back to the hotel, Gemini mentions that there's something even worse than Archbishop Andreas waiting for us, although upon turning the corner, it's just the same old parade master now rocking his very own cosplay. Now, despite him eating our ass out, we did manage to defeat him on our very first attempt, meaning it didn't take us long to arrive back at Hotel Krat, which had been absolutely devastated. Apparently the Black Rabbit Pussyhood had waited for us to be out the door before raiding the hotel with the sole goal of kidnapping Geppetto. The good news is that they hadn't hurt any of the useful and important characters, meaning we could brush this whole attack off as a minor inconvenience at worst. With a wealth of free time now on our hands, we chose to spend it learning the piano, only to unknowingly unlock the secret passageway leading to the alchemist's underground base. This place was no joke, especially considering we had to take out another Centurion puppet straight away. This paired with more goddamn traps made this a rather vicious area. The silver lining in all of this was the fact that it was a small area guarded by the very bastards who'd forced our hand in the first place.
Accept your fate. Death has come for you.
This rematch against the Black Rabbit Brotherhood was just as hard as our first encounter in my opinion. It still had us fighting them one-on-one for the most part, but their weapons now came equipped with different elements, making their attacks far more lethal. The hardest part of this fight, however, is when the eldest comes back to life, as we're forced into another 2v1, with both of them this time around being extremely aggro. Time and time again, I found myself being pulled in and shafted by both of them as I tried my best to weave their attacks. I couldn't figure out whether there was a way to slow the spawning speed of the eldest, as it seemed no matter who I left for last, he'd always come out at around the same time. Ultimately, it just came down to me brute forcing the other three down, as once I had this guy one-on-one, it wasn't all that difficult. Alas, with the Brotherhood dismantled, we're able to summon a submarine out of thin air, which just so happened to take us all the way to the Isle of Alchemists. Upon docking, we're greeted by Sophia, who mentions that she's been locked up here all along. Considering we had a better chance at getting with a carcass than the Red Fox at this point, we thought it'd be in our best interest to save Sophia, as she was about as wifey as you could get. The only problem was that Simon had fortified his base with whole-ass mortars, making our siege on the alley feel more like a suicide mission than a rescue one. Our only hope was to rush past the copious amounts of carcasses and deal with the assholes manning the turrets.
Fuck me!
This was actually easier done than said, as we'd cleared these goddamn mortars out within mere minutes. All that stood in our way now was this random door guardian, who upon his defeat dropped the one item needed to open all of these magical doors. The climb towards the Arch Abbey was for all intents and purposes the worst time I'd had with this game.
Wait, what? Ah, you gotta be kidding me.
Even if we ignore all the bullshit deaths I experienced here. Oh dude, not again! Well, how does this shit keep happening? It felt like an absolute slog working my way up this massive tower. A lot of the tougher areas just saw me running past enemies in order to take out more mortars, only to then turn around and deal with the rest of the enemies. I spared the Black Cat, had one final chat with Arlecchino, and had the biggest heart attack of my life as I almost watched an hour of progress disappear from a basic ass enemy.
Fuck! What the? Stop! What the fuck is shooting me? What the fuck? Holy fuck this guy.
My only real gripe with this part of the game was how monotonous and dragged out it felt. Due to us having to climb higher and higher, it almost forced me to play slower, as I had to carefully maneuver the thin wooden beams in fear of falling off to my death and losing all of my progress. Other sections had us slowly working through labyrinths, with enemies waiting to jump our ass should we get too close. This, paired with no real boss to break things up, made this entire area feel like a complete slog to get through, although in saying this, I was about to get what I wished for, and much more.
I'm in danger!
Luxacia the Complete, named after the fact that she's a complete nightmare to fight, is in my opinion the toughest fight in the entire game. Not only is she incredibly beefy, she has attack combos that last an entire year, elemental blows that have their very own follow-ups, and of course, plenty of damage. All of these points are contained to her first phase, however, which while tough, only took me a few tries to beat. Her second phase, however, well, let me just show you my first attempt.
Holy shit, I barely touched her.
Up to this point, we'd fought a whole multitude of bosses, ranging from easy to rather difficult. Luxacia's second form, on the other hand, was a completely separate case. Holy fuck, I'm barely getting any hits on her. I might as well just be a fucking punching bag. Trying to keep track of Luxacia's attacks in this form is like trying to keep track of a mosquito who's been lodged inside your asshole in the pitch black. Or in other words, it's goddamn impossible. The lightning that surrounds her isn't just for show, as she quite literally moves faster than lightning, and if that wasn't bad enough, she's a big enough that she'll still delay her attacks while teleporting around. At no point during any of my attempts did I think I was learning her attack patterns, and any attempt I got somewhat close to beating her, I just boiled down to good luck. She was for all intents and purposes a complete enigma, and a puzzle I was failing to solve. The best I could do was block to my heart's content and hope to God I was lucky enough to stagger her. I mean, just to put things into perspective, just how badly I was struggling with this fight. To the very end, I still had no idea that you can deflect these initial lightning blasts. Alas, a win's a win, and following her defeat, we're granted an audience with the real Sophia, or at least what's left of her. Knowing there was no possible future between us, I chose to put her spirit to rest before embarking on one final climb that was admittedly rather nerve-wracking. I mean, why wouldn't it be, when we were still racking up bullshit deaths like this? Oh, just fuck off, man. Surely I shouldn't be dying this many times to this bullshit. Towards the top, we ran into the Red Fox, who we spared out of goodwill before having one final chat with Geppetto.
Was I a trustworthy father to you?
The confidence gained from cooking our creator carried us to the peak of the tower, where we confronted Simon in an ultimate showdown that lasted no more than 5 minutes. Wait, what? Yeah. In comparison to Luxacia, Simon here was a complete pushover to the point where we defeated him on our very first attempt. I'm not even going to pretend I knew what was going on during his second phase, but considering how telegraphed and slow his attacks were in the first phase, we had more than enough heals to deal with whatever he was going to throw at us and more. For whatever reason, this last arena came equipped with a massive elevator, and after a few business days, we emerged in an underground cavern where Geppetto laid in wait. Despite him being a terrible father to us, Geppetto here still believes we'd give him our heart, and instead of taking the rejection on the chin, he chose to bring his dead son's corpse back to life, all in the hopes of forcefully taking our heart from us. The Nameless Puppet has to be one of my top 3 bosses in the entire game, and there's just something about his attack patterns that were just so fun to play around with. His first phase in particular, however, I didn't find to be all that challenging, as his long wind-up swings made for fairly easy reads to parry. His second phase, on the other hand, obliterated me within mid-seconds.
Okay, yeah, this guy's gonna take a while. He looks so sick though.
Even so, I was able to melt his first phase down so fast now that this fight almost felt like a single phase battle. Holy shit, look at the damage I'm fucking doing. I'm just fucking rinsing this guy now. The only problem was that this single phase was incredibly hard to deal with. Even so, there were a good few attacks that I found to be easily exploitable, like this backslash and his charge attack. And just like that, within another handful of attempts, we defeated Geppetto's Nameless Puppet. Thanks for the assist, little bro. We'll take it from here. Thus ends our adventures in Krat, and what an adventure it has been. At the end of it all, we'd perished a total of 118 times, which puts it a step below the Dark Souls trilogy in terms of difficulty, at least to me. Just to quickly touch on like DLC content and whatnot, these videos won't cover the DLCs as I haven't even played the DLCs for the Dark Souls series. Adding death counts from them also wouldn't necessarily be fair to the games that don't even have any DLC at all. The rankings therefore will purely relate to the base games, and speaking of games, we've got one more to tackle in this video, and I'll be the first one to tell you that it was a completely different experience to Lies of P. On the surface, Another Crab's Treasure comes off as a cutesy adventure game where you get to play as this adorable crab as you explore the vast oceans under the waves. In reality, however, this is a game about a crab who gets guillotined, slammed into oblivion, and worst of all, eaten out.
What?
Coming into this game, I had absolutely no idea what I was in for. I hadn't seen any gameplay relating to it, nor had I watched a single second of content. I was going into this experience well and truly blind. Another Crab's Treasure opens with a hermit crab being molested by a plastic shark. Krill, our awkward hero, has officially become an adult, and therefore must cope with the reality of paying taxes. The only problem was that Krill hadn't worked a day in his life, meaning all he had to offer was some radioactive turds. Unfortunately, prized possessions such as these were no longer used in the current meta, meaning we had to give up our one true treasure. With our testicles now on full display for anyone to see, we Naruto ran our way towards the open ocean, only to have this lone shark slip through our claws once more. Thus begins our adventure in the vast ocean, which starts with a short prologue on how to platform. See, unlike the large majority of Souls-likes, Another Crab's Treasure leans heavily into its platforming, and while it's not perfect, it does add another layer of challenge as we'll see moving forward. For now though, we continued forward until we saw another one of our brethren. It seems as though not every marine creature is as sentient as us, as we're bum rushed by countless crabs. Considering we have no way to defend ourselves, we had no choice but to book it. Eventually we stumbled across a rusted fork, and while it doesn't necessarily hold a candle to many of the legendary weapons in other Souls-likes, it was going to have to do. Our first bit of combat introduced the dodge mechanics and saw us beating the shit out of some fellow crabs. We also destroyed some random crystal before making our way to our first moon snail shell. These are the bonfires of another crab's treasure, meaning we'll respawn at the closest one should we ever die. One thing I did notice was the smaller selection of attributes we could level up. This wasn't necessarily a bad thing however, as it meant we could focus more so on one attribute without it completely fucking our playthrough. Continuing on, we arrived in the shallows where we stumbled across a snail. Unfortunately, we let loose the fact that we're an absolute bum, one so worthless that this snail tried to immediately end our life.
Wait, he died just like that?
Having committed murder in broad daylight, we're disappointed to find that a shell won't even fit us, once again enforcing the idea that size does in fact matter. Wanting nothing more than to cover our arse cheeks, we look to explore the surrounding areas only to find an enemy capable of two-shotting us.
I just died to the first real enemy, I think.
Given our piss poor damage and the fact that this absolute unit had a literal one-shot in the form of a grab, it soon dawned on me that we were most likely not supposed to be fighting him at this stage.
Wait, what? What? Oh my god, I've been guillotined by a fucking, what even is this thing? Shell splitter, what?
Unfortunately, my ego was far greater than my skills, so I spent the next 30 minutes getting humbled constantly as I watched this poor hermit crab get guillotined time and time again. Before long, I'd realized how overpowered charge attacks were, and with some careful dodges, we were able to defeat our very first boss. Following this, we grabbed our first Bloodstar limb, clapped the gills off a few fish, and stumbled across a rather intimidating crab. That killed us in one hit. Wait, what?
You suck!
I'm going to be honest, we were barely 30 minutes into this game and I was having a far harder time than any other Souls-like I've played. Returning to this massive crab didn't result in a different outcome either, as I watched my entire health bar be eviscerated instantly.
Holy shit, what, so like every crab can just one-shot me and rinse me? What the fuck is this game?
On my third attempt, I just looked to avoid him and grab whatever item this was he'd been guarding. This turned out to be our very first stowaway, items that we're able to equip to give us bonus stats and other abilities. Considering every fight felt life-threatening, I finally decided to head towards the massive castle. As you'd expect, the guards here weren't too impressed with the size of our package and insisted we go find something to cover up our cheeks. To do so, we had to find an old vending machine which shot out plenty of cans that we could use as a makeshift shell. What we hadn't realized, however, was that this vending machine belonged to a sugar addict who wasn't too thrilled to find that we just shot out a weekly supply of sugary drinks. Thus begins our first true boss fight, although this time we're able to block using our metal shell. While blocking, we're impervious to most damage, although getting hit does cost some of our shell's durability. As you might expect, this means our shell can break from excessive damage, meaning we can't just spam blocks as it'll most likely leave us vulnerable to another naked death. With that said, Nephro here wasn't nearly as hard as that other thing we'd faced earlier, and after learning how to dodge a few of his attacks, we'd just plastered the supposed captain of the Royal Guard. With a newfound confidence instilled in us, I decided to return to the same glowy-eyed fucker who'd bodied us before, and using the power of our new shell, we were able to take him down without much trouble. Returning to the castle, we're given an audience with the Duchess, who agrees to push back our taxes if we're able to bring back something shiny from the caves. In order to even reach them, however, we had to obtain some fishing line, which we could then use as a grapple to reach higher places. Upon reaching the entrance of these caves, we meet with a strange being known simply as the Moon Snail. He starts waffling about the hidden powers of umami, and while we were skeptical at first, all it took was one fondle of our shell and we were granted the ability to use umami spells. These spells change based on the shell we have equipped it, and as we'll come to see, some are far more useful than others. For now, we use our trusty fishing line to platform our way through the caves, making sure to grab any hidden items along the way. Eventually, we dropped into the arena of the Lost Platoon leader, and while he did immense damage, his attacks were slow and easy enough to avoid. Our new umami powers also came in quite clutch, resulting in a rather lackluster boss fight. From here, we ventured forth into the moon snail's domain, where instead of introducing ourselves, we looked to crush and steal every crystal possible. This vandalism would prove more useful than we'd ever imagined, as we can use these crystals to unlock certain abilities, like parrying. With a few upgrades under our belt, we returned to the Duchess's castle only to find that it had been completely covered in diesel. The members of the Royal Guard had also seemingly gone insane, making the journey back to the Duchess's chambers far tougher than we had originally hoped. The journey back didn't just test our combat abilities, however, as we're forced to climb our way along the castle's outskirts, oftentimes having to fight enemies on smallish platforms along the way. The platforming segments weren't too hard for now, but they won't always stay this simple. Upon reaching the Duchess once more, it becomes quite clear that she's going through a midlife crisis, and no amount of shiny pearls is going to snap her out of it. The resulting fight is an interesting one, as Magister here uses her multiple chronic illnesses to leave liquid residue on the ground after her attacks. She's also got quite the muscles on her, as she's able to pulverize these pillars in a single blow. A lot of this fight came down to pure instincts, and while I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing, we managed to take her down on our second attempt. Defeating her awarded us with our first adaptation, unique abilities that use the same resource as our umami attacks. Before we're able to come to terms with the fact that we might be the strongest pound for pound creature under the sea, we're interrupted by this cocksucker who continues to taunt us about our shell. Apparently the only way we'll be getting it back is if we stalk his ass back to New Carcinia, which was easier said than done, as I had no idea where the fuck I was supposed to go. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know where I'm going. In the meantime, I returned to the moon snail to pump a few more upgrades before realizing I had to return to the castle, where a conveniently placed door opened up for us. Wait, what the fuck? Despite every horror movie under the sun telling us not to walk through this door, it did in fact lead to a massive bridge said to lead to New Carcinia. The only problem was that it had been destroyed by Godzilla, who was on his way to his next filming set. This meant the only way to reach New Carcinia was through the coral reefs, and while this made for a rather scenic experience, it also proved to be a rather challenging one. Aw, fuck me. Thank God this game has its own iterations of shortcuts. Having sucked off the platforming gods in return for god tier skills, we arrived in New Carcinia in due time. This would act as our new hub world for the rest of the game, as it featured numerous vendors, all of which offered different services. The first place we visited was Shellfish Desires, a bougie shop that not only sells shells but lets us buy insurance for the ones we already own. This essentially allows us to spawn with that particular shell, even if it's broken in combat along the way. From here, we paid a quick visit to the museum before making the trek down under, where we stopped by the local pub. We're able to purchase stowaways here as well as increase our stowaway limit, which will become important later on. The last place we visited was the blacksmith, who like any other blacksmith, offers to upgrade our weapon should we have enough of these stainless steel relics. Unfortunately, none of the people running these institutions had seen a plastic shark wandering around, which wasn't surprising considering the arsehole that had stolen our shell was none other than this puny prawn. Before we were even able to rearrange his scrawny legs, we watched in disbelief as a whole city of crustaceans cast the fact that they're about to be covered in literal trash. This wasn't no normal trash day, however, as we're graced by the holy box of Captain Lawbeard's Dogshit Crunch. Despite this cereal receiving a 1-star review from every credible source, its true value stemmed from its backside, as it betrayed the pathway to generational wealth. Sadly, this box had been in the possession of an absolute brat who had torn the backside right off, leaving more questions than answers. Regardless, the sheer mention of generational wealth had stirred a hunger in the residents of New Carcinia, and not just the residents, but the goddamn mayor as well. As if things couldn't get any better, we're told by Prawnhead here that should we find this treasure, he'd happily trade it for our shell. Before making our way to the Grove, however, we purchased some important upgrades like our last Bloodstar limb to increase our health, as well as another stainless steel relic. We also grabbed this Lug Nug Stowaway, as I assumed more damage couldn't hurt. With enough upgrades to complete the game, we made our way towards the sands between, where we awakened the scariest motherfucker we'd seen so far.
Why is the boss health bar spawned? Where even is he? Is he like underground or something? I'm so confused. Is this like a glitch or something? What? What the fuck? Oh my god!
Safe to say, he was eating us out within a few seconds.
Oh, this can't be good. I'm just gonna instantly die, aren't I? Oh, sick. He fucking ate me. Are you joking? Is everything an instant kill in this game?
This massive crab was by far the most complex enemy we'd come up against, and considering he could legitimately one-hit us with a single grab attack, I knew for sure we weren't supposed to be taking him on this early. Even so, I wanted to give him a few more attempts, as I knew it would provide some important combat experience that I could take into the next area. Following a few more instant deaths, I decided to throw in the towel as I hadn't even managed to get him below half health yet. His attacks aren't the toughest to avoid, but knowing one mistimed dodge would lead to an instant death wasn't exactly encouraging. Instead, I returned to the entrance where I talked to Nema. She tells us to stick to the archers as they've been routed and covered in a substance so far that not even that monstrous crab could approach them. As concerning as this description was, if it meant we could pass that ass-eating freak, it was certainly worth it. This path led us to the Expired Grove, which was said to contain the first lost map piece. What it wasn't said to contain were these fucking crab archers who had the insane ability of sniping us from across the universe.
Can't lie, I didn't think you'd hit that shot.
Reaching some of these assholes was a complete nightmare, as their arrows did half of our health bar or just sent us flying off the platform altogether. Pair this with some abomination that won't stop spawning minions or leaving gunky shit over the area where he jumps, and you've got an area that's significantly tougher than this starting area.
No shit.
I swear most of my time in this area was trying to reach platforms that were being hard camped by these archers. My ass was getting hammered so hard that I had to make multiple trips back to the Moonsnail and New Carcinia just to bolster our arsenal. Even with these supposed upgrades, however, the crab archers continued to be one of the most annoying enemy types I've encountered in any game.
Bro, what the fuck is even going on? I actually can't hit this guy. Oh, don't you fucking... Don't! What the fuck? What the... I can't... What? Why is the crab jumping on the thing with me? I can't hit him. And he just nails my fucking ass point blank. You gotta be kidding.
This area was unironically more challenging to traverse than most of Lies of P's areas, which isn't something I'd ever expect to say. At some point, I literally fell off this massive tower, only to end up in the area's boss arena moments later.
This guy has some serious aura. I'm about to get my cheeks clapped, aren't I?
Heikia, more so than any other bosses we faced, felt the most similar to other Souls-like bosses. His attacks, while simple, had a certain rhythm to them, and his animations were clean to the point that any death of ours would be due to our own negligence and ours alone. With that said, he's still a boss, meaning his damage was immense. He's also the first boss to have an entirely unique phase too, where his attack speed increases and he gains an instant kill grab attack. I'd argue his second phase is easier though, as he loses out on a lot of his crushing attacks. This means we can essentially block the majority of his attacks and take him down without much trouble. We're awarded our first treasure map piece for our troubles, as well as another stainless relic, which we immediately took to the blacksmith to get a much needed upgrade. Following this, we upgraded our stowaway capacity to 6 before returning to the Expired Grove, where we looked to explore the area in which we fell off earlier. This didn't necessarily result in much, meaning it was time to put this first map piece back on the box. This ultimately highlights the next area we'd need to explore, although there was one major concern. The pathway towards this area wasn't routed or centered, meaning we'd either have to run from Pagaris here or fight him.
Fuck, I'm still cheeks.
Despite all the upgrades we'd had since facing him last time, we were still getting our asses kicked. These beatdowns were so one-sided in fact that I just ended up booking it towards Portsmouth Vale in the hopes of getting a better Moonsnail location. I wasn't ready to throw in the towel just yet though, so back out we went, and we weren't going to leave this hellhole until this guy was toast.
Fuck! Oh my god, are you serious? That's gotta be the fucking unluckiest shit ever.
This may have been one of the unluckiest moments of the entire playthrough, but it did prove one thing. We could definitely defeat this guy here and now, and with this newfound confidence welling up inside of us, we were able to take him down on the very next attempt. The exhilaration that followed didn't last long however, as we were momentarily fisted by Roland's right hand.
What do you mean by that?
This fight, more so than any other, felt extremely one-sided. Not only could this guy two-hit us, his rapid movements and ability to climax on our face made him an impossible target to hit. It got to the point where I was seriously considering whether or not I could even beat this guy. Even after a handful of attempts, I had barely gotten this guy down to 75% of his HP, and honestly, it was looking extremely grim. Thankfully, the developers weren't cruel enough to ram this big of a skill check right up our asses just yet, as we only needed to drop his HP to a certain amount before he fucked off. In some ways, the fight against Inkerton was a much needed skill check, was a much needed reality check, as the area he guarded wasn't for the faint-hearted. If the seas of gunk weren't bad enough, the enemies who constantly take a dump following every jump made finding suitable ground a complete nightmare. Pair this with enemies who can shoot through literal walls and you've got one of the toughest areas we've explored yet.
Did I just get shot through the wall?
While exploring, I came across another section of the expired grove, although we wouldn't return to this area until much later, as I believed it was the path in which the story would take us later on. For now, I made my way towards the port of Portsum Val, where we ended up running into the scuttled steamroller, who, true to his name, steamrolled the fuck out of us.
Now that's a lot of damage!
I have never felt so humbled in my entire life. Here I am, pushing 30, getting absolutely shit on by goddamn crabs with paint rollers. I mean, could it get any lower than this? Apparently, it could, as I spent the next 15 minutes getting absolutely railed by this very crab. His crushing attacks were extremely lethal, to the point where tanking even one of them usually meant death. Because of this, I leaned towards a more reactive fighting style, where I would bait out his combos and then hit him with charged attacks afterwards. This ultimately worked, although if I'm being honest, I wasn't too proud of myself going forward. With depression taking a hold of us, I did what anyone else would do in this situation. I sold a bunch of junk so I could at least pretend I was happy with all the money I had just received. Our depressive streak would continue though, as I was immediately stumped on how to get into this massive complex. This paired with the fact that I had no idea how to reach the goddamn mailbox led me down a dark path in which I was completely lost for what felt like hours. After an embarrassing amount of time, I finally figured out where to go, only to end up in yet another boss arena where we had to fight against gun-wielding shrimp. These two dealt some insanely high damage with their attacks, yet despite this, I still felt that they were by far the easiest boss in the entire game, mainly due to them having fuck all health. Alas, with them defeated, we're rewarded with another adaptation, which for all intents and purposes, was absolute dogshit.
Wait, that's it? What is that fucking puny damage?
If that wasn't bad enough, we're then cucked by the game's textures. Oh my, you fucking kidding me? Eventually we made it back to the second map piece, although upon returning to the cereal box, we learned that the third map piece was held by none other than Pagorus, the creepy crab who stalked the sands between. Seeing as we'd clapped his cheeks on our first attempt, we're able to chuck in the final map piece, confirming that all of this was a waste of time and effort, as Roland here comes in to scoop up all of our hard work. Returning to Portsum Vale, we learned from Nema that Roland had already made his way out to the slurry, and the only way we could reach him was if we generated enough electricity to power this makeshift ship. Despite our best efforts, it seems as though we needed a higher voltage, and the only place around that seemed capable of producing such energy was Scuttleport. Scuttleport, as you might imagine, still contains some rather annoying enemies, although a lot of our traversal revolved around solving puzzles that are geared towards 5th graders. Wait, I don't get it.
You're a donut! You're so stupid!
The higher we climbed, the more intense the platforming became, yet despite this, it was always worth it to explore off the beaten paths. The general idea outside of thinning out the crab population was directing power across this massive power line. This saw us travelling between multiple structures, all with their own unique platforming challenges. The added verticality did make things rather awkward at times, as I'd spend whole lifetimes trying to figure out where the fuck to go. Sometimes we'd be led to hidden treasures, while other times we'd be greeted by the death screen. Our adventures in Scuttleport would end with one of the strangest boss fights I've ever encountered.
Come on, let's play!
What the hell is even that?
Voltai, unlike the majority of the bosses we've faced so far, is a gimmick fight, in which she dashes from junk pile to junk pile, all of which house different weapons for her to use. Due to the disparity in her weapon choices, some phases were extremely annoying, while others were downright diabolical. Oh my god, she's using a goddamn vibrator. Her second phase ups the annoyance by introducing gunk across the floor, severely limiting our movement capabilities and making certain phases a complete nightmare to maneuver. The good news is that we managed to slay this beast well before she figured out how to use that vibrator. With the God of Thunder's powers now under our control, we're able to charge the power circuit that we'd stumbled across before. This opened up another hidden area which housed an old world whirl. This electrocute adaptation would also prove powerful enough to power our ship, although before setting sail, I looked to explore the other half of the expired grove we'd stumbled across before. Despite reaching this point, this area once again solidified the fact that I could not platform for shit. Eventually we reached the Curdwood village, which housed whole-ass snipers. These crabs not only did incredible damage, but they were also rather narcissistic, as they'd make sure their handiwork was left for all to see. Holy fuck, I got a massive arrow stuck in me. The more we explored this area, however, the more worth it became, as we came across some rather interesting loot. Holy shit, I've done it. I found the best outfit in the game. The highlight, however, was coming across to Potter.
Or perhaps you truly wish for death. Well, I'll gladly oblige you, my friend.
This guy just radiated aura, and it's a shame that I hadn't stumbled across him earlier, as it was quite clear that we were over-leveled at this point in the game. He's got some incredibly cool moves, and even being over-leveled, he still proved to be an extremely threatening boss. Alas, we managed to defeat him on our first attempt, although instead of sending him to the Shadow Realm, we chose to spare him, knowing full well that he could teach us some of these sick moves.
My disappointment is immeasurable.
Honestly, the only adaptation worth upgrading was Royal Wave, as I used that constantly to build up extra balance damage on most enemies. From here, we returned to the junk store where we made an absolute fortune, only to then go and spend it on some more Stowaway capacity. With our capacity now at 8, we were able to equip the Shark Tooth plus Stowaway, which I believe to be one of the best items in the game. Following this, we returned to Port Val, where we powered our ship and ventured forth into the slurry of human feces. Upon arriving at what looked like the edge of the world, we're forced to dart across some rather sketchy platforms only to end up in Roland's arena. I honestly underestimated Roland on my first attempt, as I didn't realize just how much range his stab attacks had. With that said, that's about all Roland has going for him. His attacks in general are extremely slow, giving us plenty of time to hit him with charge attacks and knock him off balance. For what seemed to be the big bad boss, he was extremely simple to defeat. With only 10 hours of content behind them, the developers knew this couldn't be the end of the game though, and out of the depths rose Roland. Considering how difficult it is to purchase a house these days, we rushed Roland in the hopes of securing the very treasure he was standing on. In what can only be described as game logic, we're apparently so goddamn heavy that merely jumping on this chest causes the entire pinball machine to topple over the side of the world. With the fuck up of a lifetime behind us, we venture through our new dark surroundings until we come across Firth. He'd stumbled across the legendary chest we'd all been hunting, although upon closer inspection, he deemed it completely useless.
You're a fucking idiot!
Ignoring the fact that there's a house deposit sitting in a chest behind us, we continued until we were molested to death by countless critters. Our mental state at this point was too much for even these bottom dwellers though, as we're left alone with our thoughts, until we're graced by Nema. She reminds us that we spent $45 on this game and that giving up here would be an absolute waste of value. With this realization in mind, we ventured forth into the Unfathomed, which somehow topped every other area we'd explored in terms of how much it made me want to kick myself in the nuts. This place was filled with enemies that bait you in with the allure of treasure, ranged guys that you can't even get close to, and goddamn titans who spam hyper beam attacks on our ass.
Bro, what the fuck am I fighting? What's going on? What happened to the cute game?
Getting to the first moons now was extremely stressful, but even this paled in comparison when learning that it wasn't even a safe spot just yet. Holy shit, what? It's a fucking boss. The only silver lining was the fact that this guy didn't appear to be too difficult, because I swear to God, if I died at this point, my next door neighbor would be getting a new PC setup delivered straight through his window. Leaving the land of these massive crabs would eventually lead us to a familiar pair, although it soon became clear that they hated traveling with each other. Thus begins our second encounter with Ingerton, who I deemed the toughest boss in the entire game. We got a preview of his attacks in our first fight, but he's definitely got a few more this time around, along with them being far more lethal. His grab attack in particular was absolutely disgusting, as it essentially one-shot us from full health. I don't even want to know how many times this motherfucker grabbed us. All I know is that I was slowly losing my mind. His fast attacks paired with his insane damage just made this fight extremely tough, and despite getting my ass handed to me multiple times, I can't in good faith tell you that I was getting closer to defeating him. It was only after I started to focus on dodging his crushing attacks as well as moving away during his grab attacks did we make any meaningful progress, and after another handful of attempts, we'd finally done it.
You bastard. Seems I'm as worthless as you.
Me personally, I wouldn't take this level of disrespect.
With both Roland and Ingerton out of the picture, the mystery behind this demonic voice only heightened.
You always knew you'd end up down here, little crab.
Strangely enough, we find Conche sitting inside a shell, who in turn tells us to do the same. These shells, known as plot armor shells, activate an elevator that takes us even deeper to an area simply known as the Old Ocean. Now, as cinematic as this reveal was, there really wasn't too much down here. The more we explored, however, the stranger things got, as we encountered crabs who shit out their offspring following their deaths. They weren't exactly the toughest foes, however, as our overpowered charge attacks could one-hit them. Eventually, we stumbled across a bridge that had assholes lobbing goddamn dishwashing tablets at us. Considering the rate at which these things were being launched, I figured it'd be easier to book it across the undersides of the area as we looked to sneak up behind them and finish them off. Lifting the gate allowed us to enter Carcinia, the Bleach City, which looked about as lively as my last birthday party. The Bleach City takes the hardest part of every previous area and combines it into one. There's tough platforming that even adds timed elements, plenty of tough enemies who can two-hit you at any point, and countless branching pathways, some of which lead to incredibly overpowered items. The biggest letdown at this point in the game, surprisingly, were the bosses. The Bleach King may as well have been the Disabled King, as he basically remained still the whole fight and let us just beat up on him for a minute straight. Even his second phase, which saw him being reborn, wasn't all that difficult, as I knew Hero's helmet essentially blocked every one of his attacks. Fittingly, this dogshit boss's throne was none other than a toilet seat, and considering we had nowhere else to go, it was only right that we flush ourselves down it. For whatever reason, the perfect well was here all along, although before Conche could blow his load talking about it, he's taken out by Kaiten. Now, it's clear that Kaiten was being controlled by something. What that was, I guess we'll never know. Oh, never mind. Our fight against Kaiten continued the streak of disappointment, so basically came down to taking out these crabs while avoiding prior slow-moving bomb attacks. This was further expanded on in her second phase, which basically acted as a running simulator, as there was no way to directly hurt her. Instead, all we had to do was run around the arena dodging her attacks until she ultimately shit herself. Okay, I have no idea what the fuck's going on. Alas, with the creepy demonic jellyfish gone, there was no one left to stand in our way.
I'll be right back! Whoa! What happened? I put on this cool looking shell and for some reason I feel super great now. Like I could take on the whole ocean.
We do not care.
As if things couldn't get any worse, Firth's pea-brain plan to save New Carcinia was to cover it in a pile of shit. If we're being honest here, we couldn't care less about that city. All we really wanted was that perfect shell, and if it meant clawing it from Firth's dead ass, that's exactly what we were going to do. Firth, like the two bosses before him, was a complete pushover. In fact, I'd say he was even easier than the other two, as his attacks did minuscule damage and they weren't exactly the hardest to read. His second phase might have been even easier, as while he did more damage, his attacks were still extremely slow and very predictable. Following Firth's defeat, we equipped the perfect whirl only to immediately waste it by punching Firth into oblivion. At the end of the day, we lost the shell, New Carcinia was covered in literal trash, and worst of all, this scumbag still wouldn't give us our shell back, meaning there was only one thing left to do. Well, that was fucking easy. So there you have it, a story about a crab who had his home stolen from him, and his descent into severe depression which somehow fueled him enough to commit murder in broad daylight. At the end of another crab's treasure, we had perished a total of 51 times, making it by far the easiest Souls-like we've beaten so far. Despite saying this though, it certainly provided a decent challenge at times, and the addition of platforming segments definitely helped separate it from the pack in terms of gameplay. With 2 Souls-likes down, who knows what'll be waiting for us in the future. Once again, thank you to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Make sure you check it out on PC, console and mobile, and don't be afraid to jump in as it is completely free. Don't forget to use my links in the description as you'll receive a massive bonus package with all the goodies you could ever hope for. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider dropping a like on the video and subscribing. A special thanks to all of you that support me through becoming members. It honestly means the absolute world to me. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll be seeing you all in the next one.